So good evening, everybody. I'm Amy Andrus. I'm the Special Education PTA Chair. So tonight we have our final speaker from the Child Mind Institute. This webinar will be recorded, and all three of our parent webinar recordings from this year will be found on the Special Education website through the remainder of the school year. And also, I'm going to email everybody the presentation from tonight, everybody who registered. So Margaret Dyson is here tonight to discuss fostering friendships and social intelligence. Dr. Dyson is a psychologist and the training coordinator for the Autism Center at the Child Mind Institute. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology from Stony Brook University. Dr. Dyson completed her postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Psychiatry at University of California, San Diego, and the Child and Adolescent Services Research Center, where she was involved in a large-scale studies evaluating the effectiveness of an intervention for youth with autism spectrum disorder and comorbid mental health conditions. She has previously served as a staff psychologist and clinical supervisor at Rady's Children's Hospital of San Diego's outpatient psychiatry clinics. Dr. Dyson has authored peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapters, as well as presented at a number of national conferences. So we're excited to have Dr. Dyson with us today, and we received some great questions in advance. She's going to try to answer some of those during her presentation, and then she'll leave some time at the end to answer some more questions, and you could always put those in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So now I would like to welcome Dr. Margaret Dyson.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for this opportunity to meet with you all and share so hopefully some helpful information about fostering friendships and social intelligence. I am trying to, again, gear this talk for children across the age range from K to 12, and again, include some practical strategies for you to take home with you throughout, but again, welcome any sort of questions in terms of how to maybe tweak some of those strategies for your child. So a little bit about just the Child Mind Institute quickly. We're an independent nonprofit organization based in both New York City and California, and our teams work every day to provide evidence-based clinical care, conduct cutting-edge research, and publish scientifically sound information. So together, it's our mission to try to empower parents and professionals and policymakers to support kids when and where they need it the most. And then just briefly, a little bit more, we do take a three-pronged approach. So firstly, we do provide clinical care to children struggling with mental health and learning disorders in our offices both in New York and California. And then we really do focus on trying to provide targeted evidence-based treatment to help children thrive. Our teams are also at the forefront of neuroscience research, investing in efforts to allow for earlier diagnosis, more individualized treatment, and more advanced interventions. And then lastly, it is really our goal and why I'm here tonight, to help educate parents and policymakers and educators with information to address common mental health stigmas and break down the barriers that prevent many children from accessing care that they need to be able to live their best lives. So now, moving on. So tonight, I have a lot of information I would love to share with you, and I'm going to try to do that in a concise way. So I am going to start with a little bit of just background information about why friendships are important, as well as a little bit of relevant developmental information to be looking for with your children. I then want to briefly touch on the impact of COVID-19 on socialization and friendships. And then I want to move more into talking about just what are some of those common challenges that we see with socialization. One of the big ones, and one that's constantly evolving, is socializing in screens. And within that, I'll also talk about other common issues in social development. So I know there were some questions with regard to handling teasing, handling bullying, how do you handle gossip? So I will try to provide some practical strategies as well as some resources to help with those. And then I do have a couple other strategies just to help continue to promote healthy friendships with others, and then hopefully some time for questions. So Just moving on here. So we do know from extensive research on the benefits of friendship across the lifespan that friendship and socialization are really critical to child development and psychological well-being. So we know that having at least 1 to 2 close friends can really buffer the impact of stressful life events by providing a built-in support system for the child or teen. Additionally, friendships are also associated with greater social competence in later life, as well as the ability to effectively communicate with others, to assert one's needs and rights in acceptable ways, and also be able to show interest and empathy towards others. We also know that friendships are positively associated with greater self-esteem and self-confidence, and negatively associated with anxiety and depressive symptoms. Friendship also provides a great opportunity for children and teens to learn how to appropriately resolve conflict with others and develop effective problem-solving strategies as well. Just a little bit about just sort of some of the processes to be thinking about in terms of helping your child build friendship over time. So there are again a number of different processes, and these are the kinds of processes that you're going to want to support for your child. So you obviously can't just say, okay, all right, Sammy, you're going to be best friends with Bobby and expect that to happen. But if you happen to see Bobby and Sammy have similar temperaments and interest, and there's a potential that they could get along, then that might be a way to kind of help foster and support that. And we'll talk a little bit also about having get-togethers and having successful get-togethers. So kind of recognizing that in your child could be important to try to encourage those types of friendships. But in terms of how it might kind of evolve and change over the lifespan, we know with little kids, the goal is really just to try to get them to be in proximity with one another, to sit close to one another, do things together for an extended period of time. As your child transitions into more that preschool age, you can start worrying a little bit more about the reciprocity piece. So are they sharing? Are they taking turns? Are they showing interest in their peers and trying to engage in cooperative interactions with them? Then as children move more into elementary school, those social norms really do start to matter. So kids, they want to be cool, they want to be liked by their peers. The social hierarchy does start to form, and kids do start to understand that there are certain social standards that are held in order to be successful socially. So you can support this by giving them opportunities to show off their skills or those interests or strengths that they may have as a way to kind of help foster their confidence. Another important aspect of this age is also giving your child opportunities to be kind to others, do favors for others, also compliment others to help build some of those pro-social skills. And also talk a little bit about other ways to reinforce those a bit later. It's also, once a child, though, gets into middle and high school, that's when children are starting to kind of look for something a little bit deeper. So a friend is someone that they can trust, tell their secrets to, and they won't worry that someone's going to turn around and tell the whole school. They're looking for peers who are going to be loyal to them and will stand up for them. Although I think we know in reality, sometimes that's not always the case. So again, I might disclose my deepest secret to my best friend, but then if the popular girl starts to talk to her, she might turn around and give my personal information to her and throw me under the bus. But then a few weeks later, she may come back around and act like nothing happened. So for those of you who have more preteens and teens, this might sound familiar. These are common scenarios, and we will talk a little bit also how to handle things like rumors and gossip in a little bit. But if this does come up for you and your kid confides in you about these types of challenges that their friend ditched them, it can be really helpful, one, to be very validating and giving them opportunity to listen about those concerns and validating, that it is hard to be a kid these days and have friendships. Another strategy can also be to also share anecdotes from your own life, as well as like moments where that maybe came up from you and how you coped from that. So trying to show some resilience strategies and how you were able to move on and grow from that. This also can be a nice opportunity to open some discussion about is this a friend that is worth investing your time in? And does this friend really have your best interests? So again, using these as teachable moments as they happen. So again, based off the research, we do know that good quality friendships in elementary school and adolescence, as well as in young adulthood, have been shown to embody these core characteristics. So that is, a good friend tends to be good friendships tend to initially be built on common interests. So this can be things like sports and art, video games, and that really can serve that initial foundation of that relationship. Again, it's not the thing that maintains the relationship, but it's a way to start building on a relationship. We also know in healthy relationships that friends, they care about one another. There is that mutual trust. You can share private information and secrets with them and trust that other person will keep it private. We also know that all friends have disagreements, but a healthy relationship is actually able to problem solve and resolve those disagreements and repair the relationship. So again, these healthy friendships serve as an opportunity to really work on those conflict resolution skills. And then also it's important that healthy friendships are bidirectional, are shared and equal, and that both friends are equally invested in the relationship and take turns communicating with one another, inviting each other on get-togethers. So again, throughout this talk, you'll probably hear me sort of refer back to this. This is sort of our gold standard or rubric that we can use to measure friendship. So again, when there is conflict that does come up, or some of those challenges related to bullying and teasing, kind of having that discussion with your child about like, okay, is this friend embody these characteristics? Is this friendship sort of worth the investment in time? There is also from the work of Liz Logginson, who I also share a good bit about. She often says that, friendship is a choice. So I can't be friends with everyone and everyone can't be friends with me. So we do have a choice in terms of who we are friends with. But these criteria can be very helpful in terms of making healthy decisions and lasting friendships. Okay. In terms of just the rates of friendship building, again, it is important to keep in mind that although friendship does tend to follow a somewhat predictable sequence, not all children progress at the same rate, and everyone will hit their social stride at different points in their life. So the main thing to really think about is you don't necessarily want to worry about how many friends your child has, but really more about the quality of those relationships. So do they have quality friendships with kids who are supportive and caring, loyal to them, they're shared and equal, and they have common interests with one another. I think it's also helpful too to kind of reflect on at this moment when you hit your social stride. Everyone hits it at different points. Was it at elementary school or was it a little bit later in life during more high school or even college? And so everyone has their own path or trajectory. So I do just briefly want to acknowledge just some of the impacts of COVID-19. So again, child and teen socialization, it is highly dependent on social gatherings and get-togethers. And I'll again talk about more of those strategies in a moment. But those in-person activities like extracurriculars, sports, the environment of school, they do provide an essential place for youth to practice important social skills through face-to-face interactions with others. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, our children and teens underwent a sustained period of time during which they really missed out on critical face-to-face opportunities to develop and practice those skills related to interacting with different personality styles, communicating and problem solving with others, and resolving minor disagreements with others. So again, you may ask your child how they might resolve a certain scenario, and they may be able to kind of tell you all the different steps. But one of the questions to really ask is, can they actually translate that into real life? And so what we've seen is sometimes there's a bit of a gap in terms of sort of that knowledge, but then actually being able to put that into practice, which should suggest that there might be a bit of a skills deficit there, and that the child might need more opportunities to practice those types of skills. And that's where things like get-togethers or working with school staff and teams or in smaller groups to practice some of those skills can be really helpful. Other things just to acknowledge that have happened and that we have to be aware of is that we have seen reduced motivation and increased avoidance and anxiety to engage with others. And there has been more of an over-reliance on virtual methods to socialize. But we do know that certain aspects of social communication are really better in person, including reading nonverbal cues, facial expressions, body language, practicing skills related to turn taking and physically sharing, and increased engagement and feelings of closeness. So that is sort of one sort of outcome. And so we've had to kind of work more with kids. I've seen just more in my day-to-day practice in terms of helping kids being able to re-engage in face-to-face interactions. And then lastly, just want to acknowledge the increased psychological needs that have come since the pandemic. And we've seen a lot of increased anxiety, particularly separation and social anxiety, stress and depression in youth. Also just, unfortunately, an increase in some sleep challenges, as well as disruptive behaviors and aggression in youth. So again, when considering your child's friendship and social needs, you also want to take their broader psychological needs into consideration, and how those might potentially also be impacting their socialization. So for example, if you've observed that your child or teen is exhibiting a lot of anxiety symptoms in social settings, they might benefit from some additional support from a mental health professional to help learn some strategies to cope with their anxiety, so they can then enter social situations and maximize those opportunities to practice their social skills and build healthy friendships. So again, a little more of kind of all the background when I acknowledge that, but I am going to talk just about some of those strategies we also use related to addressing those challenges related to the teasing, bullying, and socializing with screens and gossip as well. Okay, so a little bit just with screens. So here we have, according to the 2021 census conducted by Common Sense Media, which is the leading source of entertainment and technology recommendations for families, we know that U.S. tweens and teens are spending about 5.5 to 8.5 hours per day on screen media for entertainment outside of just their daily use for school and homework, which is it's a lot of time. And since the pandemic, screen media has actually grown faster than the start of the pandemic. So we know that tween media use has increased by about 49 minutes a day, and teen media use has increased by about an hour and 17 minutes per day. Also, just a really great resource guide. They're constantly updating it and has some really great tips for families about how to manage screen use. So I do also want to just talk a little bit about, actually, let me see if we can move this out of the way. Nope. About are there some benefits though to screen use, particularly with gaming? So much like the mall or the playground during pre-pandemic times, online video games provide a virtual meeting place, somewhere where friends and acquaintances can meet to hang out and have shared experiences. And this can serve, again, as a nice opportunity for kids to connect, particularly during the pandemic. This was great in terms of them to kind of try to maintain some of those relationships and connections. And this is some information from the Entertainment Software Association's yearly survey. Again, I want to say with the caveat that this is basically a video game lobby, but I think it does have some interesting insights in terms of how gamers and are actually viewing some of the benefits of video game play. So they are noting that it does sometimes help with problem solving. It can be helpful to connect with others outside of the family. It also can be helpful for reducing some stress as well. The ESA also has highlighted some benefits for gaming in that it does provide an opportunity for parents and families to socialize with one another around a child's area of interest. And also it serves as an opportunity for parents to get some intel on the types and quality of the games that their child and teen are engaging in. So again, there are some benefits, but then now I want to spend some time talking about what are some things, some concerns that we have with regard to the kids growing up in this digital age. So part of the problem with screens is that they can make it very difficult to be present, and not just to others, but also within oneself, and having that connection to our emotions. Just in daily life, we're bombarded with screens. Dinner with family is marked by constant interruptions. Children and teens take their phones everywhere, to bed, to the bathroom. And as a result, the constant presence really does limit one's chances for spontaneous encounters. So making it really easier and more comfortable to relinquish your attention to the screen rather than making yourself available for others. That's sort of one concern that we have with that. Additionally, tweens and teens have learned to do most of their communication while looking at a screen and not at a person. And so the concern we have with that is that social interactions, as I mentioned earlier, don't just include conversation, but the words, but there's also a lot of nonverbal information that we get from having face-to-face interactions, like the facial expression, voice tone, eye contact, which really do provide important information. So speaking indirectly through text, social media, DMs, or online gaming platforms does create a barrier to clear communication. And again, this puts everyone then at a nonverbal disadvantage. So that's something to also be aware of. And the other thing is, as a result of that, if they're only communicating via screens, children aren't necessarily hearing or seeing the effects that their words might be having on others, and learning how to have more of those spontaneous interactions with others. The other big concern that arises from kids communicating more indirectly or just purely through screens is that it has gotten a lot easier to be cruel. And when comments are made anonymously or without repercussions of having to see the other person's facial expression, it is much easier to text and post all sorts of things that one would never actually say directly to someone's face. And we have seen that more, especially true of girls who typically don't like to disagree with others in real life. So again, that's also one thing to be highly aware of. We're still learning a lot about just sort of like the long-term use of screens with kids. But in terms of what we do know for sure is the research on screens shows us that too much screens pushes out other important developmental moments for kids. So I think the big question to ask yourself when it comes to screens with your child and deciding if it's too much or not is, what is your child missing out when they're using screens? Are they missing out on socializing face-to-face with others? Are they missing out on being outdoors? Are they missing out on like things like riding a bike or exercising? So I think that's sort of the larger question in terms of asking yourself, are they engaging with screens too much? So again, ideally, digital media should not replace in-person experiences, but rather should just be an adjunct to face-to-face interactions and other modes of communication. So again, it's okay to have some of those interactions, especially during the pandemic. I think it was very helpful for some kids, again, to be able to maintain those relationships, but it shouldn't constitute all of their interactions with their peers. I think a few other things just to point out is that we do know, again, how much digital media is used does matter. So teens who use screens the most are less happy than those who use a moderate amount. And those who use a moderate amount are actually happier than those who use none at all. So we call this the Goldilocks hypothesis. But in terms of what we mean by moderate, it's a little tricky. I think it's sort of dependent on your child. There's no clear line, but I think the goal of what we're trying to achieve is actually a balanced approach in their lives. So is your child having fun with friends and family in person? Are they pursuing outside interests? Are they staying healthy and exercising? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they doing okay in school? So if they're kind of hitting all those different domains, then they're probably in a good balance. But if something is sort of lagging behind in that way due to some of the screen use, then it's worth reevaluating the amount of time they're using. In terms of social media, it does also matter what it is used for. So Facebook's own researchers found that endless scrolling and liking with no interaction actually tends to make people unhappier. We also know that teens who are digital status seekers tend to engage in riskier behavior offline. But then we also know that teens who are in more marginalized groups who use social media to increase their social connection in online communities where they can be accepted and supported, they can find positive outcomes there. And then lastly, just about this particular area, there are a lot of variables that make it really hard to nail down the cause and effect. But in general, we know that kids who are unhappier overall do tend to have more negative outcomes using social media than kids who are happier offline. So I think also just making sure to take stock of like how your child is functioning in their day-to-day is definitely going to also impact their behavior online. Sleep is also really important. So a lack of sleep is often overlooked when it comes to mental health. So also just being thoughtful about how that and how social media use might be impacting one's child's sleep. And then again, ultimately, if the digital media seems to be making your child unhappy, then that's really enough to go on, and it's worth sort of having that discussion and reevaluating how much time they're spending on media. So again, these are some other tips for managing screens with your child and teen. It is really important to place some parameters and limits around screen use. And I think as much as possible, try to involve your child and teen in that discussion. So it's a collaborative process where you're coming together to put some family rules in place. So I often work with families on developing what we call like a screen contract. And then we have all the members actually sign the contract. And when developing this plan, you're going to want to, as part of that, you're going to want to be very specific. So you're going to want to kind of designate the days and times they're allowed to have access to their screens, such as, after homework or only on weekends. And then if necessary, also implement any specific parental control apps to help reinforce those time limits. There's one, most of you may be familiar, but there is one called like Screen Time that can be very, very helpful. Coming up with a plan for screen use, you also want to really clarify those safety guidelines with your teen. So this includes things like not sharing personal information or passwords with others other than outside the family. You also want to establish rules related to informing parents if your child is being harassed or bullied in any way. And as a caregiver, you should also regularly be checking and monitoring use of their social media and texts. There also are other apps out there. There's one app called Bark app that will actually filter out also signs of harmful content. So that's another way also to try to kind of limit what your child is exposed to. It's also really important to outline rules of conduct around screen use. So this includes making sure, making your child agree that parental permission has to be received prior to downloading any apps. You're not sharing any embarrassing or any inappropriate pictures of anyone, or engaging in any behaviors that would be considered cyberbullying, like spreading rumors, sharing videos, spreading any gossip. It is important to just always try to keep the lines of communication open related to monitoring your child's screen use and well-being by designating phone-free times, such as at dinner or family outings. And then related to that, you also want to just help your child monitor their thoughts and feelings around screen time. If the device is making them unhappy, then they need to limit their use. We also want to work with our kids about proper etiquette with our phones. So you want to make sure that they're developing awareness about how their screen use may be bothering others or preventing them from responding or being present in the moment with others, or creating a distraction or sometimes unsafe situation if your child's not paying attention and they're crossing a busy street. And then lastly, with some other tips here, you also want to lay out expectations for your child with regard to gaming behavior. So this includes use of appropriate language, not accepting friend requests or messages from strangers, and also indicating which games are allowed or are not allowed, and really sort of spelling all of this out and then having everyone breathe. Okay, so I want to talk now a little more about some other common issues that tend to come up throughout the lifespan. So given that children are actively developing and cultivating a variety of skills across their lifespan, it's not uncommon, that these issues might come up at different points, and different types of issues come up for different types of kids. One of the most common ones, though, I often hear about are challenges related to perspective taking, which is, again, that ability to look beyond your own point of view, put yourself in another person's shoes. And difficulties in perspective taking really can lead to challenges with turn taking during conversations, monopolizing or railroading conversations, quickly changing the topic of the conversation, sharing inappropriate information with others, or abruptly ending conversations. And so one of the ways we try to actively teach that, for if your child actually needs some more support in that domain, then there are some different strategies we will tend to use. And I have a video example. So one way we actually work on perspective taking in some of our social skills groups is through role plays or video modeling. You can also do this through different TV shows and stuff like that. You are having the clicker handy and pausing and then processing some of those interactions that you see. So I'd like to just share an example of a role play, and then I want to show you some of the perspective taking questions that we will ask after we look at some of these role plays. And I think these are questions that you can also bring and use with your own child when processing different social interactions with them. And these are videos. This is from based off of Liz Logginson's peer intervention. So they have some great videos. These videos are also available online through UCLA Peers program through YouTube. And in this one video here, this is our friend Alina here, and she is having a hard time. She's being a conversation hog. So I will play this and then talk a little bit about how then we might kind of break down the interaction.
Hey Allison, how was your weekend?
It was really good. How was yours?
It was really good. Yeah, I went to go see the new sci-fi movie with my friends, and it was such a good movie. Yeah, we had a great time. And then we got a lot of popcorn and chocolate, and we had such a good time. And after that, we all went to dinner together, and we went to my favorite pizza place, and we got the best pizza, and it was huge. It was so big, and I had half of it. And then after that, we had a sleepover, and we stayed up all night. And I stayed up the latest. I stayed up till 3 in the morning, and now I'm super tired. And I have so much to do today. I'm gonna go swimming, and then after that I'm gonna walk my dog to the park. It's my favorite park by my house, and yeah, I'm really excited. I have a really long day, but I'm really tired because last night I stayed up really late, and it was fun.
So what we have here, so again, you can see that Alina completely dominated that conversation, was a conversation hog. And then what we usually will do is when we're breaking, these are some simple questions that you can ask your child after you've maybe noticed them engaging in an interaction or you've watched an interaction. So asking, what was that like for the other person? So the other girl, her name's Allison. And yeah, Allison didn't enjoy that conversation. You can tell by her, not only she didn't get a chance to say anything, but you can also tell a lot by her nonverbals. So she was sighing, she crossed her arms, arm, she was looking away, she rolled her eyes. And then you can ask that question, what do you think of Alina? Well, she probably didn't think very highly of Alina. She thought she just was a conversation hog and didn't give her a chance to talk at all. And then ask that question of, would she want to talk with Alina again? Probably not. So again, these are just some simple questions that you can ask as a way to break things down. These are also just some other tips that we have. So again, if you're having your child watch an interaction, you can ask, what was that like for you? Getting to process their feelings, or what was that like for the other person? Asking those questions like, how can you tell what that interaction was like for them? So asking about the voice volume, body language, facial expressions, and then asking some of those similar questions. Do you think they're going to want to talk with you again? Also, you could ask questions like, what could be the problem with being a conversation hog, or what could be the problem with sharing too personal information with others? And as I mentioned earlier, it can be great to try to sneak some of these lessons into movie nights or TV and pause in the show and ask some of these perspective taking questions. It's also really helpful to share examples of perspective taking from your own day. So I think coming in and sharing about, I noticed one of my coworkers at work today seemed really frustrated and overwhelmed with their work. So I decided to, ask if they needed some extra help with things and help them out. So again, showing them how you're also trying to practice these skills in everyday life and are able to put yourself in other shoes. So I want to shift and talk about bullying. So there were a number of questions related to this, and I know this is a tough topic, but we do have some evidence-based strategies I would like to share with you. And I want to be, Amy, are we okay in time, or is it possible? I'm happy to go over a little bit just to make sure we get through some of these strategies.
Yeah, no, we're totally fine. And if you're okay going over, I think
absolutely.
Everybody's very interested in
absolutely, because we had some great questions. So I want to make sure I can address those.
Go ahead.
So again, bullying, it is unfortunately a specific type of social conflict that children are exposed to. It is a worldwide problem and affects children, across all countries. It does tend to peak in middle school and does tend to sort of decline over time. But the way in which we define bullying is it is an aggressive and an intentional act or behavior that a group or an individual repeatedly carries out over time against an individual who is unable to defend themselves. And then within the bullying, there's always this imbalance in power. There's that power differential. But bullying can also take a couple different forms. So we have verbal bullying, which is probably the most common. That's things like name calling, threatening, belittling, cruel criticism. We also have physical bullying, which again, that's more of those physically aggressive behaviors of hitting, kicking, scratching, and pinching. It could also be like taking someone's money. Then we also have relational bullying. So this is through gossip, ignoring others, excluding, shunning others, spreading rumors. And then we have cyber or electronic bullying. And this is when you carry out bullying through some sort of electronic form of communications like text message, DM, social media. With that, we do know that relational bullying is more common, and both relational actually and verbal bullying are more common with girls, and physical bullying is more common among boys over time. The reason why I sort of break it down is because the way in which we respond to the bullying, that we have different strategies in terms of which we respond. So we're going to respond to verbal, especially the verbal and physical bullying in different ways. So I will try to briefly go through some strategies with those. So in terms of, I want to first talk about handling teasing, and teasing falls under that category of the verbal bullying. So in terms of the advice that kids are usually given with bullying, the most common advice is either, and it's coming from well-intentioned adults, is just to ignore the teaser, to just walk away from the teaser, and then to tell an adult. But then if you ask the child if these strategies actually work, they usually tell you, yeah, they're not really that effective. Because you usually hear if you ignore the teaser, they might just keep teasing you. If you walk away from the teaser, they'll often follow you. And if you tell an adult, they might retaliate or call you a tattletale in some way. So I do want to share, I'm going to share some strategies, again, based off of Fred Frankel and Liz Logginson's work, which really focuses on teaching what we call ecologically or socially valid skills. And the way we can think of those skills are, these are skills that are naturally used by kids who are socially successful. So what really sort of works in real life with kids. And these are the skills that and behaviors that distinguish children who have peer difficulties from those who do not. So some socially valid strategies in terms of ways to handle teasing. The first step, again, is you don't want to react by getting upset or mad or teasing back. Because in those moments you're actually, which can be challenging, you don't want to give the teaser what they want. We know that teasers tease because they're trying to push your buttons. They're trying to get a reaction from you. And ultimately what you want to try to do is show them that you're not upset, and make it fun for them to tease you. So again, sort of the first step is don't tease them back and don't try to engage in banter with the teaser. So again, you want to act like what the person said doesn't bother you. And then what we want to try to do is provide a short comeback that shows the person what they said is lame, and you're actually just trying to shut down the teasing. And you can also combine this short comeback with a sort of dismissive nonverbal communications. This can be an eye roll or a shoulder shrug. So these are some examples of just a short tease back. It can just be like, oh, whatever. Am I supposed to care? And your point is, and it's always good for your child to have a couple of these in their back pocket to be able to use in these different, because this comes up for all kids. Then once you actually give your short comeback, you want to remove yourself after from the situation. So you can either do this by walking away. If you can't completely remove yourself from the situation, you might want to you can either turn your body away from the individual or try to start talking to someone else. One note about this too, though, when we are teaching these skills, we make it very clear that teasing comeback shouldn't be used with adults or authority figures. This is really just for peers and for peers who are engaging in more of the verbal bullying or teasing. So I think I have another little quick video clip that I can show you here. So in this video, let's see. So again, she's going to use some of she's going to try to remain calm in the interaction. She is going to use some of those teasing comebacks and then remove herself from the situation. So let's see.
Man, Alina, those are some ugly shoes.
Whatever.
I wouldn't be caught dead in those. Those are nasty.
Is that supposed to be funny?
I don't know if it's supposed to be funny, but those are not cute.
Anyway.
So those are some ways she did that. And again, this is something we would practice over and over with our child to kind of make it more naturalistic for them. In terms of strategies for handling physical bullying, so again, some of these too, if there's a child who has a reputation of bullying, we can sort of think of these as, if your child is actually being physically bullied, obviously you want to make sure that is addressed and targeted and get the proper support from if it's happening at school with school staff. But again, there are kids who have more of that reputation related to bullying, and you want to just stay out of the bully's radar. So I really do think of these as sort of prevention strategies. So the first one is you want to avoid the bully. So you want to stay out of reach of the bully. If the bully can't find you, they can't bully you. So try to stay out of the area where maybe the bullies hang out, or plan a different, if you see the bully on the way to class, maybe there's another way to go where you don't encounter the bully. It's also important to lay low when the bully is around. So don't draw attention to yourself. Try to keep a low profile, because if the bully doesn't notice you, then they're not going to bully you. You also don't want to provoke the bully. So you don't want to say anything that might upset them because again, especially if they're a physical bully, they might be retaliate in a physical way toward you. You also don't want to use some of these strategies like the teasing comebacks with the bully because that might actually provoke the bully if they become embarrassed with others. So that's also something as a parent, sometimes you have to help your child distinguish between like the type of bullying that they're receiving. So if it is a physical bully, then you're going to want to discourage them from using those teasing comebacks. Sometimes kids think like, oh, if I just become friends with the bully will like me and they won't bully me anymore. But that rarely works. So, because what it does is it actually just puts you in the path of the bully and they actually may manipulate you or pretend to be friends with you while continuing to bully you. And just in general, bullies don't make good friends. Don't, in general, as a rule, try not to make friends with the bully. We also know that there's safety in numbers. So hanging out with other people can be a protective thing with bullies. Bullies generally like to pick on people who are by themselves, and they don't want to pick a fight with a group of people. So they know generally your friends will step up for you. Also, it's helpful to stay near people of authority when the bully's around. So I think this tends to come up more like in a lunchroom type of setting when there are a bunch of kids. So again, kind of senior yourself closer maybe to either the lunch monitor or other teachers, because again, they're going to be less likely to bother you if you're nearby an authority figure. And then getting help from an adult. Obviously, if you're actually being physically bullied, it's important to loop in other teachers, principals, other counselors is going to be important. And then last little piece here with bullying is with minimizing cyberbullying. So similarly, with this, some prevention strategies that are important are you want to try to stay calm in the reaction. So you don't want to react to any negative comments. It's what we call don't feed the trolls in the chat feature. And give the bully what they want because you're feeding them all the information and the big reactions, and they can always take that and use that against you. But if you are cyberbullied, again, some similar rules that we would follow. So you want to also try to keep a low, lay low online, keep your profile, maybe deactivate your profile for a period of time. You also want to take measures to either block that bully as well as add, approve, or the block features on the tags or comments. If some really significant bullying does happen, you do want to make sure to save the evidence, and you can do that by taking a screenshot and then deleting that post. And then obviously, if in more extreme cases, you want to make sure to get support from a supportive adults or authority, and then if needed, report the bullying to the proper authorities, whether that be the webmasters, school providers, all of that. So the last piece, I'll kind of wrap there and be mindful, and then I can always jump in with some other strategies. But these, there were some questions related to managing rumors and gossip. So just in general, to try to prevent some of those situations, it's best to avoid being friends with a gossip. They typically aren't loyal friends who are going to keep your information private. But then also you want to also lay low. You don't necessarily want to be the enemy of that gossip. So some of those other strategies of keeping a low profile can be helpful here. And then if you are caught in the midst of a conversation with others where gossip is happening, really try to remain neutral as possible in those situations. And then don't try to spread rumors or gossip about others. What we do, like every instinct though that we have wrong with regards to handling rumors and gossip, is you don't want to just try to disprove the gossip when we actually do that, or show that you're upset in those interactions. It actually, you come across as more defensive and people might assume you do have something to hide, and then it can actually backfire on us and add to the rumor mill. And people will start gossiping about how upset you are. So even though it is very distressing in that moment, you want to try to use some of those coping skills and try to remain calm in the moment. Another skill is that we don't want to confront the source of the gossip. Again, this is only going to escalate the feud. The person may start even spreading more gossip about you, and that could even result into an argument or a fight. And then that person will feel justified in spreading the gossip about you. And then you do want to avoid the source of the gossip. So again, try to keep your distance from that source of the gossip, as they may be expecting a confrontation, and not give them what they want. These are some other strategies. So again, if you hear a rumor about yourself, one way to react actually is to act amazed that anyone would actually believe or care about that gossip. And by acting that way, that place of surprise, it actually discredits the believability of the gossip. And then acting amazed, it also can discredit the importance of that gossip. So again, sort of doing the opposite of what we typically have done in confronting. These are some examples of acting amazed, that anyone believe the gossip. So it's gonna be like, I can't believe anyone would believe that. Oh, people are so gullible. And then again, so acting amazed, or can you believe anyone cares about that? Or people need to get a life or get a hobby. This is a sequence or strategy you can follow. Is sometimes what we can do is actually spread a rumor about yourself. And this is a way to indirectly deny the rumor. And by doing this, you're actually discrediting the source of the gossip and making it less likely that others are going to spread the rumor for you. So an example might be, is you find a supportive friend, and in the presence of others, show that disbelief or amazement about it. So you're acknowledging the rumor, but then acting amazed that anyone would believe or care about that rumor, and then repeating that with your friends. And then again, they're more willing to kind of stick up with you and discredit the rumor. So I do have one last little video I can also show to illustrate this point.
So Allison, did you hear that rumor that I have a crush on James?
Yeah, I did hear that.
Like, seriously, who would believe that?
Seriously, I don't know.
Like, by the way, find something more interesting to talk about.
I know, right?
I mean, people need to get a life.
Really?
Like, get a hobby or something.
They really do.
So lame.
So.
That's one example. The last piece, actually, I realized there were some questions about get-togethers and the value of get-togethers. So I think that might address some of those questions. Is that okay, Amy, if I just kind of touch on those there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm going to just skip ahead to some of those in terms of, so there were some questions about like, what are the value of get-togethers? Do we need to be having get-togethers? In general, with kids kind of through adolescence, from elementary to adolescence, kids are typically having 1 to 2 get-togethers a week. And we do know that having a get-together is a good way for kids and teens to hang out with their friends and deepen those relationships. So another way we really think about get-togethers is it serves as a mechanism for developing and deepening our friendships. Get-togethers also provide the opportunity for children to try out new social behaviors and figure out their social identity and build their social competence. And a get-together can also serve as a really nice opportunity to show off their competencies and strengths to others. So we do know that get-togethers are actually best when they're activity-based. So ideally, you can collaborate with your child to try to identify some potential activities with your child. In general, the topography and landscape of get-togethers has really changed, I think, since we're all younger due to a range of different factors. Previously, there was more spontaneity and it was based more on proximity. But today, parents have to be a little more involved and for a variety of factors. And parents really do play an important part of being an agent of change and using these as opportunities to really practice these different skills. These are some examples, again, by no means an exhaustive list here. And again, I'm sorry if some of this is blocking that. I'm sure we could share. See if I can move that. I can't move this for whatever reason out of the way. So again, these are across some different domains here. The ones I do really like to point out are just some of these indoor activities. And again, they can be very simple. I've seen kids, for hours enjoy playing with balloons and bubbles. You really can't go wrong with those, or doing kinetic sand. But in general, it can be really helpful to have a couple different activity options available and set up, or a menu of options ahead of time for your child, again, to help it be more successful, as well as to account for boredom if that comes up. These are also, again, just some other strategies, again, more for younger kids or big kids. Again, bubbles, Lego, board games, like you can't go wrong with any of those. And then in just terms of preparing for the get together, if you happen to know the child's parent, it can be helpful to ask ahead of time what that child's preferences might be, and asking them if they have, and throwing out some ideas that might work for them. You could also have your child, though, as part of practice, be a social sleuth and have them ask their peer about what they might like doing together. And then before the get together, again, you want to decide beforehand what you're going to do and who's going to be there. So you're really thinking about like the who, what, when, where, and how of the get together. As I previously mentioned, you want to have some activities ready. I do want to note, though, when it comes to like video and computer games, you really want to, you can do those, but you want to limit that to about 50% of the time. You want to have some other opportunities where the child is having the opportunity to converse and talk about common interests and ideas, as well as can practice other good sportsman types of skills. You also want to make sure you're staging the environment prior to get together. So if your child has built an amazing Eiffel Tower or Star Wars Lego that they're really proud of, but you don't want to get broken, make sure you're putting that away, as well as putting away any potential distractions that might be in the environment. And again, you want to make sure the space in which they're playing is going to be presentable. So if it's a room or the living room, just making sure it's a place that's going to be conducive and limited with distractions. If possible, sometimes it can be helpful to do a trial run with your child. So especially if it's a new game that they're playing, like a board game, doing a trial run, so they're clear on the rules, as well as how to like handle losing or winning appropriately. And as a general rule of thumb, if it's a new child, so it's a new friendship, it's really best to limit those get-togethers to about 2 hours. Again, it's better to end the activity on a positive note and wanting them to play more than having it go on too long and it kind of dissolve over time. So maybe should I pause there, Amy? Again, I have other stuff I can do, but I can.
I know this is great, and everybody
Yeah.
is still on, so it's
Okay.
very helpful, interesting information. If anybody has some questions they want to put in the Q&A that we haven't touched on, because I see you integrated a lot of the previous questions into it, please feel free to share it.
While I'm doing that, I'm also just going to go to, these are, I think, just some really helpful resources. These are, a lot of these skills I'm drawing upon are kind of based off these interventions, but these are books that parents can get easily through Amazon.
Great. I'm just looking over some of the questions.
Yeah.
One question that came up is, my daughter has been burned by many friends, so has a hard time opening up, trusting friends. How can I help her?
Yeah, it's tough. And I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to hear that. Again, I think it's, the most important thing is again, trying to kind of validate those feelings that she's having. I would again then try to kind of bring that discussion back to that initial rubric that I have of like, what are those characteristics that we're looking for in a good friend, and have a discussion with her about like, okay, what are those values of a friend that are going to be supportive of you, understanding, that you can trust, and are going to have your back, and really sort of reevaluating, maybe is she selecting the right group or peers of friends from there. So I think that was something that be the place where I would sort of just start the discussion. From there too, I'd be curious to do kind of more of a broader assessment just to see if there are any other potential challenges the child might have, or certain skills they might need to work on to help continue to deepen those relationships.
Okay, great.
Yep.
I saw another one that was had come in earlier.
Yeah.
How important is it to foster the same friendships? For example, they change classes from year to year and sometimes tend to make new friends. Should continuing friendships from the previous years be a priority?
Yeah, great question. And again, I think, again, if your child, if you feel like it's actually a really healthy relationship, that peer is supportive of your child and you're liking how your child is interacting with that peer, I do think it can be helpful to help foster that over time. Again, it is more effort and work, but again, we know from the research, having close relationships really has a positive impact and buffers a lot of stressors in life.
Yes. And then she just had a follow up on that.
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that?
Oh, no, I must. Sorry if I don't have that.
Okay. Separately, it's actually a separate question. When you see some friends displaying behaviors you don't feel are kind, healthy, like being bossy, dismissive, always needing to get their way, how can a parent handle that? And should they continue those types of relationships for their child or provide them with the skills to be more assertive?
Yeah. So no, that's a great question. So again, I think that's where sometimes you have to use your judgment as a parent if you feel like that child's being an appropriate influence or not for your child. So again, I think using again sort of does that child embody those characteristics of a healthy relationship, then it might be worth to continue pursuing that relationship. If it's not a good influence, then again it may be best to try to kind of steer your child to another peer. I think also I think I just saw there was a question just related to selective mutism. I think there were some questions related to that, which should definitely come up with peers. I'm just trying to kind of find that.
Yes, my son has a mild case of selective mutism. It would be great if you could share tips for kids who come across as very shy around unfamiliar children.
Yeah. So again, with children, we know with children with that type of profile, and again, we do have some great resources on our website. There's actually a wonderful guide on social and selective mutism. We could probably put in the chat. But again, with a kid who has some of those challenges, we know those kids might be a little slow to warm up to different social situations and might need a little bit more warm-up time. So again, if they're about to engage with a group of kids or have a play date, it could be really helpful to get to the location ahead of time, allow them some time to adjust to the environment. And then you're also just going to have to kind of adjust your expectations for the child in those interactions. Maybe for, the first of the play date, you're just wanting the child to be close by and at least engaging non-verbally with the peer, and then eventually being able to say hello to the peer, and engaging in some brave talking. But in general, when addressing selective mutism, we do tend to use more behavioral therapy approaches for that, which involves working with a therapist and child to get the child comfortable speaking in one situation at a time. So it's gradual. But I think you would sort of think of social interactions similarly as sort of gradually increasing the challenge for the child and reinforcing when they are showing those skills like brave talking and engaging with the child.
Okay, great. I just also want to mention that there's a survey that was put in the Q&A. So if people could just take a quick minute, fill it out, it could just help us so we know what type of lectures to offer in the future that would be of interest to some of the parents in the community.
Yeah.
So I could see if there's any other questions, if anybody else.
Sure. Also just share, like we do, again, for some kids, they'll develop these skills without support, but if kids do need more support in certain, like handling bullying, handling teasing, how to have conversations, we do also have groups available. In our groups, we tend to take a comprehensive approach to have the parents involved as a social coach as well as the child. And so these are some group offerings we do offer for
great.
that. Yep.
Here's another question popped up.
Oh, sure.
How to handle when a kid is being excluded from friend group chats and does not understand why?
Yeah, again, I sort of would be curious to look at, so as a parent, I would kind of look at those chats and access and kind of break those down too to see, is your child missing any particular cues within that? Or I would also be on the alert for any type of bullying that might be occurring, and then having a conversation with your child about like, okay, is this how friends treat each other? Is this, are these friends that are worth like investing your time in, and maybe using some of those strategies I spoke about with like handling rumors and gossip.
Okay. You might have answered this, but
Yeah.
how to help when a neurodiverse kid is bullied?
Yes. So again, I think the big piece we want to distinguish is the type of bullying. So are they being physically bullied? Is it verbal bullying? Because then that definitely is going to determine the approach that we take. So again, if it's more of that verbal bullying, then we're teaching the child to maybe be able to stay calm in those interactions, use a teasing comeback, and being able to remove themselves from that situation so the teasing doesn't continue. If it's more of that physical bullying, again, using some of those prevention strategies I spoke about, as well as trying to loop in the necessary support staff and authorities to be able to address that if it's happening.
Okay. No, I think these are great tips. It was so much great information, and thank you so much.
I know
for
it's a
spending
lot. I'm
the
sorry, but
time.
it's a lot.
No, it's great. We're going to send your video out to all the registrants so they could review it again, because there is so much great information in there. I don't see any more questions coming through. So yeah, I just really want to
thank you for this
thank you.
opportunity.
Of course. No, thank you. And sorry about the beginning, but I'm glad we got some extra time with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye.